All right, guys, welcome. Today we're going to take a look at lesson 10, which is just basically a lesson on color correction. We're going to do a little bit of stuff with masking on here too. So we'll take a look at masking. We'll take a look at like ways you can kind of like make a background track a little bit. So there's, as much as like there is some new stuff, it's going to be a little bit of like reinforcing some of the other things that we've done. To get started, if you guys want to jump into Blackboard, I have everything ready to go for you guys inside lesson 10. There's just an assets folder. What you're looking at is these two videos, SuperKid 1 and 2. There's some move files, and then there's a JPEG that we're going to use as a background. We're going to mat out an area and then replace it with these clouds, and just kind of play around some settings and kind of make it track and kind of follow the action a little bit more closely, instead of just being like a still image that sits in the background. So what we're taking a look at is those as our start files. I was planning on reviewing the kinetic type project and almost like doing almost like a little mini critique. I tried earlier. I've been checking links. I still can't get my Blackboard to share audio. The only like solution that I found is that you're supposed to be able to share it like through a Chrome tab. I could not get mine to work. So what I'm going to ask that you guys do is just pull up in that folder, take a look at everybody else's. If I can get this figured out, we'll do like a little kind of informal session after spring break when we come back. In the meantime, it's just a limitation of Blackboard, like that share audio thing that it's supposed to be able to do. I just couldn't get the function right. So I don't know if it's on my end, if I need to update Chrome, but I'll do a little bit of testing over the next week. And then when we get back, especially like going into final project stuff, I want to be able to actually like critique these and let you guys share your audio and like, you know, be able to share that whole part of it, because I think these things without like the music behind it, especially for kinetic type where like you need to hear the syncing to make it all work, I think it's gonna be kind of an important one. So that's where we're at with that stuff. And then again, next week's spring break, so we'll jump into that. We'll jump into the next lesson. We're gonna be skipping lesson 11. It's really about like creating templates. That's not something that you're gonna be doing a whole ton of. So when we come back, we'll probably be jumping forward into I think like lesson 13 was kind of a cool one. It was about working with like 3D camera tracking. So we could probably take a look at that one. And then there's another one on advanced editing techniques. So like camera stabilization, kind of some different effects, just kind of some like odds and ends things that might work out pretty well. And then the last lesson is all about encoding, which we've already done. So we're actually going to skip that. So really coming out of spring break, we've only got 2 more lessons that we're going to do, and then we're going to focus more on just projects. So I have another one ready to go, and I think what I'll do is when we get back from spring break, I'll introduce that next project. So, and that'll act as our final project. I just want to give you guys lots of lead time on that to get that done. So any questions on any of that stuff? All right, then what I want to do is jump into this week's lesson. So again, your start files, your assets, these guys right here. So we're getting 1, 2 in the storm cloud. Get After Effects fired up here. So again, the big idea this week, what we're going to do is we're going to use transitions. So we're going to take a look at how you can actually build transitions into your footage, like right from the start. We'll take a look at some leveling, some mask tracking. There's this Keylight thing we're going to take a look at. There's some auto commands I wanted to play around with. And then just like, you know, some kind of color correction stuff. It's generally pretty simple to work with a lot of these. I think it's really just more a matter of, you know, trying it yourself and getting that kind of part of it down. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grab all of my pieces and drop them in here. So I've got all my project chunks. Now what I want to do is I want to make a composition. This is my footage. This is what I'm going to be working off of. But what I want to do is I actually want to blend these 2 clips together. So I'm going to click on these things and I'm going to drag them down to this new composition box. And what it's going to do is pop open a panel that looks just like this. I want to create a single comp out of these 2. I want to make sure that I'm sequencing my layers. So this defaults to uncheck. I'm going to use my dimensions. They're the same size, so it doesn't matter, but I just want to select the source footage so that I know what the dimension size is going to be. And then it says like under still duration, if I have any stills, how long they should last for. I don't have any stills. These are all movies, so I'm okay on that. But again, I want to check the sequence layers. I want to overlap these things. I want the footage to kind of blend from one to the next. So the duration is how long that lens that goes for that. So right now, if like 18 frames, that'd be about a half a second that when the 2 clips overlap, that one fades from the other to the next. We can also control how we want it to look. So if we want to cross dissolve, if we just want to do a regular dissolve, if we want to turn it off altogether, I want to do a dissolve. I just want the front layer to kind of melt away and repeat and make the part 2 appear. So when I click OK, it automatically drops in the footage. I can preview it here, and you can see it builds that transition right into it right from the start. So we got this like a little superhero kid. What we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at some color correction. We've got 2 clips here. On the footage itself, there's all sorts of stuff happening. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through like the tracking and matting kind of part. It repeats the steps a second time for this background footage. We're just going to do it on the first clip for this one. But before we get into any of that masking stuff, what we need to do is a little bit of color correction, a little bit of organization. So what I'm going to do first is on my comp, I'm just going to hit enter to rename this thing. I'm going to give this thing a name. So I'm just going to call this Taking Flight, so my comp has a name. And what I want to do is I want to take a look at playing around with a color balance and by using levels. So I'm going to rename these shots. I'm just going to call this one, highlight, hit enter. I'll call this a close shot. It's a close up. And this one, I'm going to hit enter to name it. I'll call this the wide shot. All right, so now got my stuff all named. I'm good to go. What I want to do is I want to go to this wide shot first. I want to play around with some color correction on this thing. So I'm going to make sure that I have my timeline scrubbed over just so I can see. And the color is pretty much the same throughout the shot, so I don't need to worry about getting into any specific point. I just want to kind of get a general sample, maybe in the middle of the footage. I'm going to select that wide shot. I want to make sure that I have that up. And I'm going to go up to my effect menu. And there's a whole color correction pull down. There's all sorts of different ways you can do color correction on here. It's kind of the same as Photoshop. It actually feels very similar to it. But what I want to look for is I want to look for levels, and I want the individual controls. So when I pull this open, what it does is, and you guys probably recognize these, it kind of looks like a little like histogram like you've seen in Photoshop. And I can go in and I can adjust overall values. I can adjust values by channel. So maybe there's a little bit too much red or a little too much blue. Or what I can do is I can use these sliders. Now, generally, as a rule, and hopefully you guys picked this up when you were taught Photoshop, with this footage, what I like to do, let me bump this up a little bit bigger. What I like to do is I like to grab these sliders, and you can see how there's extra space where nothing's happening. That's usually just kind of dead area, but as I bring it in, take a look what happens. The darks get darker, the lights get lighter as I bring in from this. And what I want to do is I want to slide these things so that I can still see texture and detail. If I go a little too far, it starts getting real blown out in a shirt. That's not where I want to be. I'm going to bring it back a little bit, but generally I'll kind of start sliding in from either side until I get that detail. And then what I can also do is I can play with the overall brightness here. So again, this is controlling the overall color cast on this thing. Now, if I wanted to adjust certain levels, I can grab these. And also notice I've got these little clocks here, so I can color correct as a timing effect. So if I wanted to change, like color shift something across footage, I can actually turn that on, and I've got all these different ways that I can control that by just adjusting that amount. Now, what I can do here is like say that I maybe wanted to take some red out. I can control that overall gamma. So here, if I want to just take, I'm just going to bring it down like a little bit. But again, I can control. So one is like the default. So if I go above that, I start adding color. If I start going below that, I'll take a little bit out. And I can control that for all the different channels. So if I want to do, so I can kind of see the footage here, like took a little bit of that red out, my blue is kind of popping a little bit more in the sky. But again, it's just a matter of kind of preference and knowing where it is. So that's the first thing I wanted to take a look at, was just kind of manually kind of adjusting that stuff. Now, when I'm done, I'm going to close this panel. I don't want to see that again. I don't need to have that up the entire time. I always want to kind of reset back to my normal view. And I want to jump backwards now into this footage on my close shot. So on this close shot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to that color correction. So I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correction. I want to try a different one. It's called Lumetri Color. And here, there's kind of a couple different things, and it's all hidden. It's like a little bit more, it's a little bit more tucked back. It's not like a slider. It's not as visual. But I've got all these different controllers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a look at basic correction. Now, what it does is it's got this thing called white balance. Now, when you film something, you generally hold up like a piece of paper in front of the camera when you're first setting up the film, and then you set that as an absolute white point, so it helps kind of color correct. If somebody doesn't do that, we can do this. It's called editing in post. So like we're going to color correct in post-production. It's not actual filming. And we can set the white balance here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little eyedropper, and I just want to select the whitest part of the screen, the brightest spot, so that all the other color is going to be balanced based off of that. So if I click right here, if you notice that like his skin tone kind of warmed up a little bit, the color of the brick, like everything just kind of popped a little bit more. Notice it really popped here. So if I undo that, so there's like a before. And then again, if you want to watch like the grass, the brick, his skin, any of those areas. But when I click in that really bright area, just kind of warms everything up by setting that white balance point correctly. That is a great baseline start. Anytime you're doing any sort of color correction, I always start with white balance. So there's kind of like auto ways of doing it. I just think that this works the best. The other thing that we can take a look at is we can control by curves. Again, this is more of a Photoshop style. So we can control the curves for everything. Or say that I wanted to take like a little bit of blue out of this. I could click right on this line and I can kind of pull down just a little bit. Or if I wanted to add blue into it, you can see it gets. So again, I start right at that midpoint. And I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit. And that should warm up his skin a little bit too by taking that blue up. So I'm good with that. I'm going to close it and click away to deselect. And now if I kind of preview my footage, he looks a little bit more alive here. Still get a nice red pop on his cape. So I just want to kind of maintain some of that color consistency from one to the other. I think like on this one, we never really set a white point. We could probably do that. Again, it's up to you guys as you're editing, but it's just so simple to do it. And I'll grab this. And under my white point, I can just set right there. And it kind of warms it up. And his skin tone looks a little bit more warm too. So now when I'm looking at them side by side. And again, I still have all these effects that I applied. So that's, you know, that's affecting it too. So it could just be a matter of resetting that footage. And then I've got that white point set. So that's just some of the basics of color correction, but I wanted to walk you guys through because it's a really great way of kind of working. But what I want to do is I want to play around now with replacing backgrounds. I want to play around with mask tracking. This is like your mileage may vary on this. When I played around with mine, I definitely had some inexact tracking that was done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I want to be able to see this whole area. What I want to do first is I'm going to grab this pen tool and I'm going to create a mask around this outer edge here. And then once I have that mask selected, and I'll make sure I got my close shot selected, I'm going to create this mask all the way around the edge of the house because I'm going to replace this sky with a different background. So once I got my close shot selected, I've got my pen tool up and active. And in this comp panel, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw. And mine's going to be a little rough. I'm going to kind of work a little bit more quickly here. Vector point to fix already. I'm going to clip straight through. I'm not going to worry about his hair there. I'm just going to get the edge of the houses. And here. You can zoom in a little bit. Now I'm going to track off the edge. I'm going to click up here. And I'm going to come back. Oop, there we go. And reconnect those points. Now, when I first set this up, remember that now I've got a mask built. It's going to try and clip all that stuff out of there. What I need to do is I need to take a look at the mask properties. So I'm going to press M so it shows this. And right now it's set to add. I'm going to change this to none. So now it just shows me my mask. And if I need to go in and edit anything, which it looks like I need to right here, I can grab this point, slide it down, and match that out a little bit more. I think that probably looks pretty good. Now, I've got this turned on. I've got my mask set up. What I want to do now is I want to put on a track on this thing. I don't want this footage because the camera isn't set on a tripod, how it kind of shakes. I want to try and track this and have After Effects actually control that for me. So what I'm going to do is on my mask, I'm going to right click. I'm going to do this track mask. And you see this little window pops open in the right corner. It says tracker. And what I can do is I can choose what I want to do. Position, position rotation, position scale and rotation. I'm going to do all three properties because this was handheld. And what I need to do is I need to tell it where to go. So because I'm at the end of the clip and I set this, I'm going to work backwards. And what it's going to do is it's going to analyze it. And as it moves, it's going to add in all those points. Now, it's okay. It's definitely off in spots. So just like we did before, I would need to go in and clean up my lines a little bit. And again, this is something that you're going to do one frame at a time. I'm not going to sit through on make you guys watch me edit all that down, but that gives you, it gets you in the ballpark. You're going to need to go in and do a little bit of cleanup on this. So once I have that all done, what it does is it applies that. I can clean it all out as much as I want to. I'm fine with it how it is. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to skip to right on the 2-second mark. And what I want to do is I want to duplicate this close shot. I want to create 2 of these. I want to have one that sits in the front and one that acts in the background. So with this, I'm on my close shot layer. I'm going to go to my edit menu and I want to duplicate this guy. So now, reselect this. There we go. And duplicate it. There we go. Now I got close shot 2. Now, what I'm going to do is on that close shot layer, I'm going to change my mask mode. So if I go back into M, how I had it set to none, what I want to do, I got an extra mask that I accidentally created. Delete that out. Here, I'm going to change this to subtract. And now what it should do is it should subtract it out so that the background sits behind it. The reason I want to keep the background is because we still got Buddy's hair here. So what I'm going to do is now I got subtract turned off on that close shot 2. Let's take a look at our mask properties. That extra one on there too. Here I'm going to change this to add. So now I'm going to change my properties on this. Now on the close shot back here, I want to take a look at this expansion value. I don't want these masks to overlap. I want to give them a little bit of breathing room. So on this one, M twice, how it shows all these different options. Here, I'm going to set my mask expansion to -1 pixel. I'm going to shrink it in a little bit. And now on this shot 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my effect menu. I'm going to go down to keying, and I've got this Keylight 1.2 thing. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to control all the color and the area. So now again, I want to make sure I got the right layer selected. I'm on close shot 2. And here I've got this where I can sample the area. I'm going to sample this color. Now take a look. It pulled all that color out of there, but it still found the edges. So this key pulled all that blue, but still found those edges there. What I want to do though is I want to take a look at my adjustments here. So like here I've got the screen color that I'm pulling out of it. I've got this screen balance. It's at 95. If I turn this up or down, it should control how much extra edge, and you'll see a little preview. Yours might be a little bit more subtle. I'm just going to turn my screen balance all the way to 0. Should give me a nice clean edge around all those kind of extra areas. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this toggle transparency. So if you're not seeing that background, you can turn that on and off with that toggle transparency button right there. And I also want to take a look. I've got this screen matte category. Let's pull this down. And here what I can do is I can change that white value. So I'm going to change that under clip white. I'm going to turn this down a little bit too. And you can see as I adjust this, how it kind of lets me fine tune that mask. Probably like maybe like right around 60, 70, it looks like it kind of got real clean right inside that area. But again, this is all just kind of fine tuning that mask. Now what I want to do is I'm going to, now that I have these 2 layers done, right, I've got the mask so that the background disappears. I've got the close shot where it's set to subtract, so I still see the kid's head. Everything's looking good. Now, let's close this effects panel, and we've got the storm clouds. I'm going to drag this into the bottom here, and now I've got this new object that I can control. So now I can replace that out. Now, obviously, my mask is a little off here. I need to go in and kind of clean up that mask 1 frame at a time. Just for the sake of speed of this demo, I'm not going to walk you through those steps. You guys know what that looks like. But now I've got this in place. So what I want to do is I want to kind of take a look at like how this moves. I want to make the clouds move with it. So I'm going to go all the way back to my start point here, and I'm going to bring this in maybe about here. And on this, I want to change 2 things. I'm going to press the S key so I can see my scaling, and I'll hold my Shift key and hit P so I can see my position. I want to make this stuff change. So from the start, I'll start it here, and then I'll make it kind of look like the clouds are moving. Maybe like this direction. So I think from right here, we'll start it. And then If I go to my endpoint here, now I can change where that position is. And I went a little too far because I went inside my mask. So I'll make it look like kind of the storm's blowing in. And I can also change my scale. I'm going to bump this up so it looks like it kind of gets bigger. So now as I play it back, now it's not just a flat background. Now it's kind of playing along with it. Now I also want to color correct this footage here, this JPEG, and I can control that just like I did everything else. So with this thing selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my color correction, and I'm just going to auto correct this thing. So if I go into Effect, Color Correction, there's Auto Color, Auto Levels. I'm going to do Auto Levels first. You can see it really brighten that up. And then it should match the footage a little bit better as it kind of comes across. So far so good, that making sense? All right, now last thing I want to do with this clouds footage is I want to motion track this. So I have it, something's happening as it plays back, but it doesn't kind of work with the camera shake. It's just kind of its own thing. So I want to be able to make the footage all kind of feel like it's matching a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the very beginning of the footage. I'm going to grab that close shot layer. I'm going to right click on this thing. And I've got this track and stabilize thing. I want to track the motion on this close shot footage. So when I track the motion, okay, cool. I found these motion tracker points, right? So now what I'm doing is, because I've turned this on, I want to change in my settings here a couple different things. I want to not just track position, I want to track rotation and scaling, because I know that this thing's got some footage issues with like not being shot on a tripod. So now that I have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with setting these boxes. And this was a little bit trickier for mine. You don't want to grab the actual boxes themselves. You want to see this icon so you can move this, and it even shows you a little preview of a zoom. I'm going to set this just to the kind of right corner of that E. That's like a nice high contrast area. And then the same thing here. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to set this to the top of the roof right here. So I can kind of track these points. They're nice kind of like high contrast areas. So now that I got all this done, what I need to do is in this tracker panel, I want to hit this edit target. And I want to target this to another layer. So instead of tracking it to close shot, I want to target it to my storm clouds. I'll click OK. And now, because I've applied this motion, as this plays across, it should track these points to that footage back there. So all I need to do is hit apply. Take a second to, and then under dimensions, I got to make sure I tell it that I want to go X and Y. I want to height and width. So now it should track this, and now when I play it back, my effects are happening. You can see my cloud starting to kind of shake along with it. So now it's applying that footage right along with everything else. So far, so good. Making sense? All right, now in the lesson itself, you're gonna repeat that same process. You're just gonna track out, so you're gonna mask out this area, duplicate it, drop in your footage, color correct, and mat it. I'm not gonna repeat the process twice for you guys, just for the sake of kind of speeding this up a little bit. But what I do want to take a look at is some kind of additional effects stuff at the end here. So we've seen some color correction, we've seen some tracking and matting things. I just want to take a look at kind of playing around with some finished final pieces on this. As you're editing, like, you're going to end up with a wide shot and a wide shot too. You'll still have your storm clouds layer that you'll now duplicate another one. So you're going to end up with all this footage. What I want to do is I want to kind of put a finishing touch on all of this. So rather than having to do this on individual layers, remember, if you select everything, if you want an effect to apply universally to everything, select it all, right click it, and do a pre-comp. When I pre-compose this, it's going to essentially flatten all this stuff into one layer. So here I can just call this my final. I'm going to move all the stuff into the new comp, and there it is. Now I've got one big piece that everything's all together, right? So now what I want to do, now that I have this all kind of put together, is I'm going to apply these effects to just this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So if you select the final, I'll go to my edit and duplicate. I want to have one that I apply effects to, and then I want to knock down the opacity on it so I can kind of tame down the effect a little bit. So now that I have it on here, I'm going to go back up to my effects menu, and I'm going to work on this duplicate on the top. So I'll go to effects, I'm going to go to blur and sharpen, and then I'm going to go down to Gaussian blur. And here it's going to show me my blurriness, my amounts. So I'm going to set mine maybe around like, I don't know, somewhere like right around here. It's probably going to be too much. So I get the effect, but now what I want to do is I want to change the opacity on this. So I'll hit my T key to reveal this, and I'm just going to knock the opacity down a little bit. So it gets a little bit of that effect without overdoing it. And again, this is applying it as a universal effect across the board. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to put like a little vignette. I want to kind of blend off the edges. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to make a new solid. I'm just going to do solid black. I want to make sure I click make comp size because I want it to be the same size as the footage. So I'll just click OK. Now, I made this new solid. I want to make this thing, because it's going to be a vignette, I want to make it kind of an ellipse that grabs this whole area. And let me grab. I think that'll be good. Okay, so now that I have this in here, got my mask applied, right? What I want to do is I'm going to hit my M key because I want to see my options. I can see my path, my feather. If I want to invert this thing, I can do that. So I want to invert it because I want it to be the outside that I see. I'm going to feather this thing way out. Really blend it back. And then with my opacity here, I'm going to knock that back a little bit too. Just want to kind of hit those edges a little bit so I can fine tune that on the mask. And then as I play it forward, then it kind of gives me that effect. And again, if this looks like it's maybe a little bit too much still, I can apply some opacity and just kind of knock it back a little bit too. So that's really the big idea for this. When you're done, you're going to go ahead, stop, and save this out as an encoder file. You're going to send me a finished MP4 of this thing. That is going to be it for today and for this week. So going into spring break, really what I want you guys to do is get everything wrapped up. If you're behind on anything, now is really a good time to get caught up with it. And then when we get back, we're going to take a look at lesson 13, and then let's say 12. And we're going to actually jump in right away to the final project, so I can get you guys kind of working on that. There's going to be multiple pieces. It's going to be kind of like a social media asset that you're going to be building. So is any questions, anything jumping out, you guys?
Have you not, has my the Google Drive that I shared with you for the lessons not been updating for you? I just noticed. Like, right.
Let me kill the recording and then I can double check that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So no worries, no. Let me stop.